Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I was 17 when this happened. I'm now 18, and this was right before my birthday. I was on a lot of apps to help me make friends. I'm autistic and struggle making friends in real life. I'm femme, but trans F to M, still M, and also asexual. Because of the nature of these apps, I stated in my bio that I was asexual. I also mentioned my interests. Then I met this one guy who lived maybe an hour away. I was looking for a friend to smoke with, and he said he would. I know, I was very naive. Nonetheless, we planned a time, and I waited outside for him. He brought me a wine cooler, and we took turns hitting his cart. We had deep, meaningful conversations and immediately clicked, which I thought was amazing, at least until a bit later, when I was very high. I tend to be impulsive and don't know my limits well. It was getting very cold, so I told him I should get back inside. He agreed and started walking me toward my window. I was stumbling, unable to see straight. Once we were in my driveway, he asked for a hug before leaving. Thinking it was kind of cute, I gave him that hug. But the next thing I knew, he was behind me with a knife to my neck. At first, I tried to fight back, but I quickly realized it was getting me nowhere and only causing more harm. In that terrifying moment, I thought I was going to become just another true crime murder victim. So I stopped fighting and started listening to him, hoping he'd spare my life. At the same time, I tried to leave as much evidence as possible, in case listening didn't save me. Then I noticed scars on his thighs. Somehow, I managed to appeal to some part of his humanity. My exact words were, "I see your scars. You're just like me. You're hurting. But this isn't going to stop the hurt. It'll only soothe it temporarily." I don't know how I was able to think so logically in such a panicked state, but it ended up saving my life. He let me go, but only after I agreed to meet him again. I agreed just to get out of the situation, then went inside and tended to my cut thumb. After that, I blocked him on everything but kept his messages on my phone in case I ever found the courage to go to the police. Of course, I never met up with him again and never will. What scares me the most is how much we had in common, our mentality and personality. I know predators like him often say things they don't mean, but our deep conversations had felt so real. My husband and I took a trip to Yosemite. We stayed outside the park in El Portal. One evening, while we were driving back from the valley, I noticed the headlights caught what appeared to be somebody lying down on the side of the road with both feet pointed toward the street. I told my husband that there was a person lying in the pitch-black darkness on the side of the highway. He knows I love my true crime, and he was absolutely certain that what I had seen were just trash bags. I was so certain that I just kept saying, "No, I saw a body. I know that was a person." We made our way back to the hotel. As we were about to park, my husband looked over at me and said, "Are you really sure about this? Do you want to go back?" And I was desperate. "Yes," I said. As we drove by again, I saw the feet. I had my husband turn the car back around and yelled at him to stop the car. He rolled down his window and said, "Are you okay?" And there was no answer. One more time, even louder. Now suddenly, a woman dressed in all black sat up. She was wearing a nice down jacket, black pants, and had her purse and 3 water bottles. Her makeup was done nicely, and she seemed very sweet. I could tell my husband was in absolute shock. I asked her where she was headed, and she said that she was trying to get to the Chevron station up the road and that her mom was going to meet her there to pick her up. This woman looked to be in her late 40s. I knew something weird was going on because where we found her, the Chevron station was still another 7 miles away. She said in her mind, she thought it was only about a mile from her hotel and she could walk it. We offered her a ride, and she climbed into the back seat, not before I grabbed a thick scarf to wrap around my neck and pepper spray. As we drove, we tried to ask her questions, just chit-chat. I asked why she was lying on the side of the road. She said that she had gotten tired of walking and just laid down, ready to give up. It was winter, and she had no hat or gloves with her, and I could tell that she was very fragile. Once we arrived at the Chevron station, she thanked us, got out of the car, and sat on a bench in front of the closed Chevron store. We offered to stay with her until her mom arrived, but she said she'd be fine. I reminded her that there was no cell reception in the area and triple-checked that she didn't want us to wait with her. We drove back to our hotel and noticed that there were now 2 police cars in the parking lot. They had not been there the first time we arrived back from the valley that evening. I told my husband I knew that they had to be there for that woman. I calmly walked over to one of the cars and asked if they were looking for a missing woman. The officer told me that they were and asked if I had seen her. I explained the situation, and I really felt like something very bad had happened to her. He thanked us for picking her up and giving her a ride. He couldn't tell me what had happened but thought that her leaving and going somewhere else was a smart choice. I asked that he go check on her at the Chevron station just to make sure that she was okay and that her mom did finally arrive. I realized that whatever happened was at the same hotel we were staying at that evening. I looked at the police log and found that a domestic violence dispute had broken out at the hotel. The woman had been beaten very badly, and she was so terrified that she was willing to walk in the dark without a flashlight just to escape. It's my guess that after walking about half a mile from the hotel, she was in so much pain that she needed to lay down. I got the feeling like she thought that she might actually die there. She couldn't go back to the hotel because she had already escaped and gone to the front desk to call her mom. Her husband knew that she had been there and would have come after her. The front office called the police for her while she escaped, and it was my understanding that the man who hurt her was her husband and was arrested. I always wondered about her and whether she went back to him. Did her mom pick her up? Is she safe? And now my husband listens when I say there's a body on the side of the road. It was early 2020, and I had just gotten a new job in a small town near my area. While looking for a place to live, my sister offered to rent me her house. She had bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it, and their commute to work was long, so they moved out. The house had been uninhabited since. Luckily for me, it was pretty close to my workplace, around a 40-minute drive, and my sister basically rented it to me for free. I just paid for the water and electricity and looked after the place. I had been living there for about 2 or 3 months and had already gotten used to it. One night, after coming back from work and parking my car, I was walking toward the front door when I noticed something odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb near my house. I leaned down and picked it up, thinking it might have been mine, since I'm a smoker, but after checking the brand, I realized it wasn't. I shrugged it off, thinking some jerk had tossed it there, and went about my night. Nothing unusual happened. 2 days later, as I was walking up to my house again, I spotted a few more cigarette butts, this time near my porch. Needless to say, I was livid. I figured someone had sat on my porch and smoked, but since I had no idea who it was, there wasn't much I could do. They looked like they'd been put out pretty recently, so whoever it was had probably walked off just as I was arriving that night. Later that evening, I was watching a movie on my laptop. It was pretty late, past 1 a.m., so I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood, and during that time, most people weren't going out at night. Still, I didn't think much of it. About half an hour later, I heard quiet chattering outside. I listened intently, but I couldn't make out what they were saying, their voices sounded muffled. By this point, I was getting a bit unnerved, so I paused the movie and quietly got up from the sofa to check the front door. As I approached it, I froze mid-step. The voices were getting closer. They were now right outside my porch, and their conversation dropped to a whisper. Right away, I knew, whoever these people were, they wanted to break in. I leaned silently against the front door, expecting a loud bang or the doorknob to start shaking. But instead, it was oddly quiet. I tiptoed over to the front window to see if they had walked away. My windows had bars that lock from the inside, and I had to unlock them to move the curtain or look outside comfortably. I slowly unlatched the bar mechanism and lifted it. As I pulled the curtain aside, I was taken aback. Leaning against my window was a man. He was just as startled as I was, stumbling back with wide eyes. He pulled his hoodie up tighter to hide his face, but I saw his big blue eyes staring at me. Then his friend realized what was happening and ran up to the door, kicking it hard, once, twice, 3 times. He kicked it a solid 4 or 5 times, but the door wouldn't budge. The whole time, I stood there frozen in fear, trying to process what was happening. I finally snapped out of it, slammed the window bars shut, locked them, and ran upstairs to the storage room. I shoved a table against the door and called the cops. Downstairs, I heard them shaking the bars on the windows violently. When they realized they couldn't get in, one of them let out a long, angry scream that probably woke half the neighborhood. By the time the police arrived, they were already gone. The cops never found out who they were, but they started patrolling the neighborhood more frequently afterward. Still, I didn't feel safe staying there. I moved out shortly after, and my sister ended up selling the house a few months later. As far as I know, nothing like that has happened there since. I was backpacking in the Balkans, southeastern Europe, and since I wanted my trip to last as long as possible but didn't have much money, I'm from Hungary, and salaries here are really low, I had to sacrifice comfort many times. I stayed in hostels, ate cheap food, and used questionable public transport. That's why I booked the midnight train in Greece from Thessaloniki to Athens. During my stay in Thessaloniki, I mostly stuck to the city center, by the Bay Area, which looked nice, much like any other big European city. However, the train station was in a different area. I had to check out of my hostel in the morning, so I spent the whole day exploring the city, and then the afternoon near the train station. I did this so I could stay close to the station and wouldn't have to walk around in that area after 11 p.m. That part of the city was a lot less appealing. It was full of garbage, graffiti, homeless people, and sketchy individuals. The train station wasn't much better. It had a semi-enclosed coffee shop inside, and I stayed there as long as I could, but it closed at 8 p.m. While I was sitting in the coffee shop, looking at my phone, I snapped my head around when I heard a loud noise. A man dressed as a soldier rushed in and appeared to be searching for someone or something. The shop was small, with only 5 or 6 tables, and I was the only other person there. He saw me, but didn't do anything. Instead, he went to the counter to order. He spoke loudly, even though it was quiet in there. I found it weird but didn't think much of it, especially because he was speaking in Greek, which I didn't understand. At 8 p.m., the coffee shop closed, so I packed up my bags and went outside. There were many strange people loitering around, and they didn't seem like they were waiting for a train. I say that because I went to look at the tracks in advance so I'd know how to find my train on time. While I was there, a train arrived, and nearly all the people from the waiting room ran to the platform, but they weren't getting on it or greeting anyone. They were just walking up and down, and once the train left, they stayed. They were all middle-aged men. No women, no children. I returned to the waiting area and sat on a bench. I was nervous, so I plugged in my earphones and continued browsing my phone, but I wasn't listening to music. I wanted to hear what was going on around me. I'm glad I did, because not long after, I heard someone say next to me, "Nice tattoo. Is it from Up?" I knew they were talking to me because I have a tattoo from the movie Up on my forearm. I pulled out my earphones and looked over. It was the soldier from before. It was weird that he started talking to me in English automatically, though I had a small Hungarian flag on my backpack, so maybe that clued him in that I wasn't Greek. I replied, and we started talking. At first, it was pretty normal. We discussed tattoos, movies, then traveling. But when I mentioned I wanted to visit Macedonia on this trip, he became more political and heated, angrily talking about Greek politics and the country's relationship with Macedonia. Throughout the conversation, he acted strange. I can't quite explain how, but something about him felt off. At first, I'd felt relieved to be next to a soldier in such a sketchy place, but after a while, I started wondering if he really was a soldier, or just pretending. He constantly checked his bag from the outside, like he was making sure something was still inside. It looked like there was a long object in it, possibly a gun. If he was in the military, maybe it was normal. But carrying a weapon around like that isn't common in Europe, especially off-duty. He asked if I was traveling alone and how long I'd be in Athens. I answered honestly, saying I was alone and not staying long. I planned to catch a ferry. He kept insisting I could stay at his place for free. I declined, several times. Then the speakers announced the train to Athens was arriving soon. We both stood up and started walking to the tracks. He said he needed to grab his luggage from a storage area next to the steps. He took out a big, old, heavy suitcase and looked like he was struggling with the weight. Then he loudly slammed the metal door shut, for no reason. It echoed through the station. Everyone looked over. It felt like he wanted attention. We started walking up the stairs, but then he suddenly said he needed the restroom and asked me to watch his suitcase. He didn't wait for an answer, he just ran back to the waiting area. That was incredibly odd. Why would anyone trust a random girl with their suitcase? I stood there for a minute or two, panicking. I was afraid of missing my train, and also afraid of what might be inside the suitcase. What if there was something dangerous in it? I waited a few more minutes, and then he came back. He asked again if I wanted to stay at his place in Athens. I said no. Again. When the train arrived, he insisted we sit together. I didn't want to, so I told him I had a seat reservation, which was true, and that I was really tired and planned to sleep the whole ride. He said he would ask a train employee if I could switch seats anyway. Then he left his luggage with me again and walked over to speak with an employee. This time, I didn't wait. I got on the train, found my seat, and sat down. Luckily, there were a lot of people, so I blended in. A normal-looking man sat next to me. The soldier never showed up again, not on the train, and not even at the Athens station when we arrived. I know this story isn't the most extreme, but it still bothers me. I can't stop wondering what his intentions really were. Was he actually a soldier with some sort of mental illness? Or was he pretending to be a soldier to seem more trustworthy, maybe some kind of predator or worse? Either way, I'm glad I trusted my gut. The story takes place a few years ago, when I, a 22-year-old male now, was around 17 or 18 and still with my ex-girlfriend. At the time, I was living with my parents in a tiny town of about 300 people. It's deep in the countryside, surrounded by vast fields, with only 3 farms making up the whole town. We had a habit of taking walks through those fields along an old path, one that was just wide enough for a single car, truck, or tractor to pass through. One afternoon, around 5 or 6 p.m., we decided to have a picnic in a field near the road. It was in plain view of any passing vehicles, and we could see them just as clearly. This field belonged to my neighbor, who had given us permission to use it. It was a few miles from my parents' house, and it was the perfect spot for us to smoke a little, drink, eat, and listen to music. Everything was going great, until it wasn't. At one point, a car pulled up and stopped right in the middle of the road. A man got out and wandered into the bushes. At first, I thought, okay, maybe he's picking nuts or something, it's late summer, after all. But something about him made me keep a watchful eye. I kept chatting with my girlfriend, trying not to be too obvious, but when I looked again, the man was standing completely still behind his car, staring directly at us. Not moving. Just watching. I didn't say anything at first and turned back to my girlfriend. About 30 seconds to a minute later, I glanced again. This time, he had moved to the other side of his car. Still not moving. Still staring. He did this a few more times, changing positions, standing stiff as a statue, just watching us. I had a cold, sinking feeling in my stomach. Something wasn't right. Then, just as suddenly, the man got back in his car and drove off. That's when I told my girlfriend we needed to pack up and leave, now. She thought I was just being paranoid, probably because of the weed we'd smoked, but she agreed. We took the path that looped around in the opposite direction from where he'd gone. The road made a big circle, and eventually, all the paths led back toward my house. But guess who turned around and started following us? Yep. It was him. Same car. Same intense stare. He trailed behind us slowly. It became a twisted game of cat and mouse. He did this not once, but 2 more times, looping around, keeping us in sight. That's when even my girlfriend admitted I wasn't just imagining things. We managed to get his license plate number and tried calling my parents, but nobody answered. At one point, he pulled up right beside us. I glanced over and noticed something on his passenger seat, but I couldn't make out what it was. Just then, my neighbor arrived in his truck. I immediately flagged him down and explained everything. He let us hop into his truck, and we drove straight back to my parents' house. My dad is a police officer, so I gave him the license plate number. He ran it through the system, and it came back registered to an elderly woman, a grandmother. The car had been reported stolen. That was the end of that chapter. But a few weeks later, something else happened. As usual, I was biking to the next town to catch the bus, about a 7-minute ride away. It was still dark outside since it was early morning. I left the house and started pedaling when I noticed a car behind me. It was his car. I don't know how he knew where I'd be. Maybe it was just awful luck, or maybe he'd been watching me. But I'm 100% certain it was him. He followed me again. Thankfully, I took a path that only pedestrians and bicycles could access. It was narrow and hidden from cars. I switched off my bike light and rode in total darkness, using the sky's faint glow for guidance. From then on, I always used that path. I never saw him, or that stolen car, again. Back when I was 17, I lived alone in a small unit that was part of a divided house. At first, everything seemed completely normal. I never saw my neighbors, and there was no sign of aggression or anything strange. But after a few weeks of living there, it started. Every single night, my neighbor would bang on the wall that separated our units. It always happened between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., and sometimes it would go on for hours. As a 17-year-old girl living alone, I was absolutely petrified. I'm not sure what was louder, the banging, or the sound of my heart thudding in my chest. I told my mom about it, but she didn't believe me at first. She visited a few times, stayed the night here and there, but every time she was with me, the banging would stop. That is, until one night it didn't. She heard it with her own ears, and instead of freezing like I always did, she decided to bang back against the wall. The next day, while I was at school, he approached her. I don't know what exactly he said, but later, my mom told me he had threatened my life. After that, I stopped staying there. I began couch surfing, only returning to the unit to grab things I needed. Each time I went back, the place had been broken into. 8 times. 8 separate times the door had been forced open. But nothing was ever stolen. We reported it, and the police investigated. They concluded that it was him, my neighbor. He was breaking in and just sitting there, smoking, in the corner of my living room. He never took a single item. He just sat there. Eventually, after 5 long weeks of stress and fear, we managed to break the lease and get my stuff out. But for the rest of that year, I was homeless. He was never charged with anything. And to this day, I still can't sleep alone. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.